when you start to listen to your life, and I have multiple call-out exercises that I've done retreats in this. And what I always do is, I'll throw out a gazillion exercises, which is usually a lot of different questions. Questions about passion, questions of, if you could do anything and, blah, 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 time was of no, those kind of
no
things.
value, right? Money.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
People think, oh, is that all that it is? I'm like, no, it's not all that it is. Then I have people step back and go, now go back and see, were there words or phrases that popped up again and again and again? We will call those golden threads. And then start to go, what do you think your life is communicating through those golden threads there? And then a really important part, we don't know ourselves apart from our friends.
Hey everybody, this is Caller ID. We're calling about your identity, your direction, and what you're doing with your life. I'm Brandon Davis Wells. Let's dig into what we're really doing here.
Every one of us, religious, spiritual, agnostic, or somewhere in between, operates out of a framework for meaning that shapes how we understand who we are and what we're called to do. Today on Caller ID, I'm joined by my friend, Dr. Jason Barnhart, a theology professor at Ashland Theological Seminary. We're going to have a conversation about identity, career, beliefs, spoken or unspoken, that do help shape our lives and our career journeys. Jason's journey includes years in ministry, walking with young people from early age up through college and into some pastoral roles, and then into the seminary classroom as well, where he now helps students think deeply about formation and vocation. Also writing a book on friendship right now and exploring why relationships play such a central role in who we are and who we become. Dr. Barnhart, thank you for answering the call.
Glad to, Dr. Wells.
It's funny. I got called Dr. Wells when I was teaching a college class last year, and I didn't correct anybody. I'll just say it that way.
They don't.
They don't need to know. I didn't say I was a doctor. They just started calling me that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We've got all kinds of folks out there listening. When people ask you what you do, when you meet somebody, what part of your answer matters the most to you?
Yeah, it's, I'll be honest. I hate that question.
What do you do?
Yeah. And part of it is because I've always been sensitive, because I have friends who, obviously don't profess Christianity as their faith, or may not have a faith at all. And I'll tell you right now, if you want to kill a conversation, show up at a bar and you say you're a pastor or you're a theology professor, and all of a sudden, everybody, the guy who's been swearing like crazy, starts to, pray the sinner's prayer before you, performative.
I'm so sorry, Reverend. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so you do the whole thing of, I work in the humanities. I do, and then finally you go, okay, goodness gracious, I work at a seminary. But if somebody really, really presses me, I say that I teach largely in historical theology, which is the intersection of church history and theology. And then, if they're not utterly bored to tears just by that introduction, I kind of go in and go, no, I'm really trying to help students discern the story that God has been telling and the story, that he wants their lives to be located in. And that's my more formative answer. Right. If the person has stayed with me, if they buy me a drink, then,
right.
Yeah, I'll tell you anything.
Right. Yeah. All bets are off. Yeah. Open book. All right. This is true. I've bought Jason a drink, and that is true. He'll say anything at that point. For listeners who wouldn't necessarily describe themselves as religious, or they're still figuring out what they believe, how would you explain why theology or worldview still matters when it comes to identity and career?
The thing that we all have to realize is that, we live in an era that we use the word spiritual, and there's confusion around that term, but really you can't help but think theologically. We all, are trying to, whether you believe there's no God, whether you believe you can't know that God, whether you believe you do know that God, those are all theological statements. And they end up shaping, the urgency or the passion with which we approach, what we do here. we all agree that we have a limited amount of time. As those of us, including the two guys on this call right now, live in that middle land, and start to kind of look at the first half and go, what's my second half going to be like? We start to realize that. So, when I talk about things like mortality, or, when I talk about things of even calling or vocation, these are theological. They may not necessarily be Christian theological, okay, but they're deeply personal, meaningful impulses that we have that we're trying to navigate. And the struggle that I think for all of us, whether you're Christian or not Christian, and this is what I try to bring to the classroom, is we don't spend near enough time listening to our life, period. And for American listeners, we are in a nation that says it's all about progress, but we literally have no idea what we're progressing towards. And by the way, our current political situation just says we're just progressing towards chaos all the time. So we're a people that are trying to figure out who we are, in the world of chaos. And I would say the fact of the matter is that whether you have faith or no faith, if you believe that there should be some level of coherence and meaning, you're making a faith statement. Because look around you, the world is as chaotic as it can be. Where in the world do you get the idea that there should be any sort of coherence or meaning? So something there is prompting you to kind of explore and go deeper. And I would say those are theological. If you want to use the word spiritual, if you want to use the word religious, those are concerns that I think are just kind of imprinted on us.
That worldview part is important, because whether you're trying to make a lot of money, whether you're trying to make an impact on the world, whether you want to be famous, whatever it is that kind of sort of starts to shape your worldview, and none of those things are necessarily bad in themselves. They definitely impact our decisions about jobs and careers, and whether we go to college or not, or what we want to do. When you think about when you were 18, this is sort of the go-to question here early on. Did you think this is sort of the path that you would take? You'd end up as a seminary professor. If you told little Jason Barnhart back when you were a kid, hey, you're going to be a theology and history professor at a seminary, what would Jason have said?
Well, first off, I would tell that Jason that you're not little Jason Barnhart, because you are actually taller than the Jason Barnhart that you will become. Because
look, I was making no judgment on height, because we're about the same height. So right.
I'm saying little Jason, you're going to lose an inch, but because you're apparently like Benjamin Button, but
shrinking like Yoda, right? Yeah.
I think that iteration of me, and you and I have both served in college capacities, and we see it. There are just impulses firing like crazy. And part of the reason that, a person is in college is we've lost the sense of helping to cultivate any sort of calling or anything. It's all been about, job placement on the other side. But when they first come in, now where I teach at a seminary where largely adult learners who many times are second and third career, they can't even put into words just these impulses, these desires, these passions they have, and trying to figure out how that goes together in some sort of coherent story to be able to tell. And so I would say, I came to college with I felt this call to ministry. I'd had some profound spiritual life experiences in my high school years, but I didn't know what that meant. And honestly, I'm in my 40s now, and I still don't fully know what that means. But one thing I can say is consistent is that I believed that God had called me to something, and I didn't fully know what it was. And I'm learning as I get older not to hold so tightly to the expression that I live in the moment, because calling should transcend the expression. It should animate the expression, but it shouldn't just be that particular expression. So for coming to college, I would have thought, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a senior pastor of a church. That was an expression of it. I can tell you right now, I'd be an awful senior pastor. I'm pastoral, no doubt.
I don't know if that's true. Give yourself some credit.
But I can tell you that, when I am in the classroom when I work with students, that pastoral side comes out. I would have never have imagined that. And even when I had the first ideas of doing graduate work and wanting to go further and do doctoral work, my first passion was Christian ethics. I tell people all the time, I don't fully know how I became a historical theologian. I don't. Somehow the winds changed and I thought I was going to go to this shore and my little sailboat went to the other one. I'm happy as can be with this, but it's odd how this, I'm from Virginia, first generation college student. How in the world did an Appalachian boy end up in the academy? And I'll tell you, there's often a warring going on between that Appalachian boy and this academy guy here, because it's like both of them are who I am. And so trying to figure out, okay, at what point do I allow the Appalachian side to come out? And by the way, when you serve in the academy, which is known for never-ending bureaucracy of meetings, the Appalachian side is always like, can I go now? Can I go now?
Let me out. Let me out.
Let me out.
Yeah.
You're like, no.
I just picture that like Yosemite Sam in a meeting at the seminary. Hey, I gotta get out. Like that's what that looks like to me. Your comment about calling an expression of it is fascinating, and I don't know that I've ever heard those words put to it. I understand what you mean, but flesh that out, because I think people out there, whether they're following Jesus or they're following Muhammad or Buddha or no one, I think people often feel called or compelled towards a certain career, a certain field. But for you, what does that mean? Like the expression of it too?
So I served as the chaplain of the University of Ashland University here in Ashland, Ohio for a number of years. And one of the joys of my time there was working to get life calling to be part of the Ashland University experience. And I worked with a great lady. Her name was Karen Higgins. So she was in the Career Center and I was, in the chapel. And she has remained a fast friend. I won't bore with all the details, but, through organizations, what we realized was, oh my goodness, how can we help students learn to listen to their lives better? And that was the passion. And eventually, it became, what it is today, where you have this life calling and career center. Here's my struggle. And I love AU. Okay. They screwed it up. They just did. Because what they did is life calling gets hijacked by career. And so you have a life calling center and you spend most of your time just doing resumes or here's how you interview and these kind of things. And the reality is the data shows that these graduates are going to go out. And by the time they're 30, a minimum of several times, they're going to have changed jobs. And the likelihood of them staying in the area of their, the degree they graduated in it's highly unlikely. And because we didn't train them to listen to their lives, they end up having sort of this existential crisis in their late 20s because they don't know what to do. They've never listened to their lives. They were taught how to interview for a job in their field.
So how does somebody listen to their live? Like, what does that look like for people? Because I think that could mean a variety of things. What does it look like to listen to your life?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Brandon. And it's one of those things of it depends on the person that I'm talking to. Some of the stuff that I have done is let's do life charting. What I'll have people do is I'll have them kind of go, okay, let's trace out have kind of a graph of, here's how many years you've lived. And then, kind of, if you could go back as far as you can remember and go, okay, when I was 8 years old, is it positive in my head? Is it negative in my head? And then maybe kind of a scale of 1, not that, somewhat positive to 3, very positive. And then likewise down below, was it -1, somewhat negative, -3. And then, as they kind of do that, then connect the dots and then kind of go and say, okay, well, what made you say that year of your life was negative or positive?
Quick pause. If you're enjoying this, make sure you're following or subscribed wherever you listen. It helps more than you think. If it's hitting home, take 10 seconds. 5 stars. Share it with somebody who needs it. Just a quick reminder.
And then to step back and start to go, am I seeing trends? So, for example, if a death happened in my family, and then all of a sudden I start to feel like I just couldn't fit in my job anymore. Well, it could have been, the job was an issue, or it could have been that maybe I just have had unprocessed grief that I've not dealt with. So it could be that, it could be journaling, but a lot of it, and you mentioned, my work on friendship is really, that's why that's been so important for me. Part of listening to your life is learning how to talk to your friends about your life. And we just don't do that. We are losing the art of good conversation. What we want to do is we are obsessed with results, and I get it.
Yeah.
If I'm a parent sending my kid to college, I want them to have a job. I get it. But it's not that that's wrong. It's just the problem is that that's all we seem to expect out of the college experience. Instead of no, I want to, college was a place at a time, especially liberal arts schools like like Ashland, where you were challenged to think critically. And that wasn't just an academic thing. That was a formational thing. As you encounter these new ideas, think about who are you in light of those ideas there. And so the reason I say that, Brandon, is when you start to listen to your life, and I have multiple call-out exercises that I've done retreats in this. And what I always do is, I'll throw out a gazillion exercises, which is usually a lot of different questions about passion, questions of, if you could do anything and, blah, 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 time was of no,
money
those kind of
no
things.
Value, right? Money.
Yeah.
Right. Sure.
People think, oh, is that all that it is? I'm like, no, it's not all that it is. Then I have people step back and go, now go back and see, were there words or phrases that popped up again and again and again? We will call those golden threads. And then start to go, what do you think your life is communicating through those golden threads there? And then a really important part, we don't know ourselves apart from our friends. Part of who you are is shaped by friendship. Your friends, and many times, know you better than you know yourself. Personally, we get lost in the weeds with ourselves because we just live it every day. But a friend can go, oh my gosh, you just now realize. I mean, we had these moments, you just now realize that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden that golden thread becomes kind of a larger animating value for me. And the reason that's important is when I go to a job change now, I can go, okay, my wife is doing this right now. My wife has lost her job. She is an AI casualty. Her entire world has been in marketing and design, and she is looking to make a pivot out of that world. And she's had to step back and go, what are the passion things that originally called me into marketing design, which by the way, she would say design, marketing, not marketing. Sure. She hated the marketing, loves the design. She is one of the most creative people I've ever met.
And she has a book out, by the way, if anyone's interested, that is
the Record Keeper.
Yeah. And it is, I've read some excerpts and it's fantastic. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, Brandon, that's a great segue here, because it was through that journey that she started to go, oh my goodness, there's a love of investigation, of creativity, of developing a story. She started to go, oh my goodness, these were some of the impulses that called me into the artistic creative world. Which was the expression
of that kind of compelling or calling. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we don't know who we are without our friends. That's a great point. You're going to keep going. Sorry.
That to me is, in our current cultural moment, is a huge breakdown of, we just live in an era of immense chaos. And you and I don't need to get into whether it's good or bad or whatever. Right. We can all just acknowledge it's chaotic.
Sure.
And then what's happening though is we're not listening to our lives. What we're seeing is that loneliness is on the rise. We're losing those just embodied connections again. And then we go, I wonder where all this anxiety and disaster came from. It's because a lot of people don't know who they are, and trying to navigate that.
On your journey to where you're at right now, career-wise, was there a moment where you said, oh, I got it. It clicked? Some people wait for that light bulb moment. And I think for some people it comes when they figure out, or they've started to figure out who they are. But for others, and for all of us, it's a lifelong process of figuring out who we are and figuring out those golden threads. And I love that language for that, because I think I'm still figuring that out at 48. Yeah. Right.
One of the things that I found in writing when I work with students on this because, one of the things I think the academy again does poorly is we don't develop a love of writing. It just becomes a burden. I got to get through it or whatever. And what I found again and again is that bad writing, even my own, usually comes from a lack of confidence in my voice. For me, and I can't speak this for everybody, but for my own journey, it's because even this last year, I've had a little bit of a kind of a crisis moment. And I've been jokingly telling, Barnhart men usually tap out at 80, so I'm over the halfway mark, by definitely several years. Richard Rohr is a Catholic theologian, spiritual writer, in his book Falling Upward, that he says the first half of our life we're trying to find our container, and in the second half of life we're trying to figure out what fills that container. And I like to add on to that and go, he doesn't go here, but I go here of. I think what happens with a lot of Americans is the first half of the life is finding the container, and the second half of life continues to be spent trying to make the container larger. Instead of going, but it's not filling. It's just you get a bigger hanger. And so I think, the first half of my life has led me to a place where I like, this is my container. I am a historical theologian at an institution that I love, and I am beyond blessed to be where I am. The crisis for me is, how do I steward that container? And so for me, one of the things that happens in the academy is it's like, how many journal articles have you read, and written, or how many conferences did you speak at? And I just go, that brings me no joy. First off, the idea of I'm a generalist by, I'm not really a specialist in anything. So the idea of me trying to invest a large amount of time in a journal article that 5 people will read, just the return on investment for me personally is not there. And I really don't approach my job first and foremost academically. That's why I fit in a seminary, because we're about formation. The container is, I'm a historical theologian. What fills it, though, for me, I'm having to learn to lean into is, I'm formational, I'm pastoral in that. I would rather see deep and profound integration of what I'm teaching with a person's life than just write academically about, this discipline. And that's hard because the academy doesn't lean that way.
Right. The
academy leans towards get published, all these things. And I'll get published, but my publishing is not going to be largely academic work. I want to write for the average person in the church, which is difficult, because again, talk about being suspended in this world of, even there, I'm a theologian, trying to write for the average person who goes to the church. I'm suspended in that kind of tension there as well. It really is just a matter of having to go. There's always been a historical theologian at Ashland Theological Seminary. Mm-hmm. Why in this season am I in that chair? And I always go back to, there was one of my favorite writers was the late Frederick Buechner, who I would highly recommend his memoir pieces that he wrote. They're brilliant but
Buechner, by the way, does not look like how you would pronounce that, just so you know. It looks like Buechner, Buechner, I think, right? But yeah. Buechner, thanks, Germans. Yes. Yeah. That German or Dutch, I don't know. Yeah, somewhere over there. I don't know.
It's something like that. When I see the name, I think of the beer commercials, Bush, kind of thing. But,
so if you're looking for Buechner,
yeah.
Right.
And by the way, don't drink Bush beer. It's bad.
No, ever. Bush latte, even worse. Right. Never. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Even if they wanted to sponsor this podcast, I would say no, thank you.
But, he says, calling is the intersection between your great gladness and the world's great need.
I used to use this quote when I was teaching and when I was talking about calling and talking about identity, and I still use it all the time. It's a fantastic, say it again, because people like, this is the crux, I think, of what people should be looking for.
Yeah. So Buechner says that calling is the intersection of your great gladness and the world's great need.
It's like ikigai, right? So I talk about ikigai too. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but with something the world needs, something you love, something you can make money at, and something you're good at. Like it's very similar, except it's even boiled down to your gladness and the world's need.
Yeah. And I think because obviously I think the astute listener would go, well, does that always happen in a job? What I tried to, counsel students with, and I know you did this as well, is, you won't find a job where it's going to be 100% in your passion area. Think about it almost as percentage wise and go, if, I am, diagnosed ADHD this past year, and the entire world goes, we're not surprised. And so I have a very different way of thinking, very divergent. What I mean by that is I don't think linear. I tend to, think of this messy kind of map, and I'm connecting ideas. Well, it probably wouldn't be a great idea to say, hey, Jason Barnhart, you ever thought of being an accountant?
Not that you're bad at math.
So it's like, no. And so could I do it? Yeah, but it would just drain me. It would just kill me. And I wouldn't be good for the company, and it wouldn't be good for me. Trying to think of this sense of you're not going to be fully in it, but you should set a goal of something about going that what you do, you find some gladness in it.
Amen. Yeah.
And be open to the fact of that gladness may surprise you. You may have thought it was going to be this, and it wasn't, and who knows, maybe I could go into, an accounting firm, and all of a sudden I go, you know what? I didn't realize how much I love Excel spreadsheets. It's just phenomenal.
I wouldn't be more surprised if I woke up with my head sewn to the carpet. Eddie, that would be a surprise. But you're right, and being open to that, but also knowing when to cut bait, right? Was there ever a yes or no decision that you, looking back now, realize, boy, that was a great no, or that was a great yes, or you stepped away from something or into something that was a difficult decision? What was that like?
I won't go into the details of this, but I didn't want to leave my role as the university chaplain at AU. But it was one of those things of the culture was so awful, was so toxic, that in conversation with my wife, Allison, she was just like, her phrase, this is sucking your soul away from you.
Well, I've heard that phrase before too, and from my wife about something, and so I know right where you're at there.
Yeah, and so I didn't have another job to go to. There was supposed to be another one, but that was another part of the toxic culture. And so I, stepped into the unknown and had no idea. But Allison and I felt, confident that this is what we were supposed to do. And it was difficult. It was very difficult.
Oh, I remember as an outsider, as your friend, thinking, Jason's crazy.
Yeah.
He's leaving this comfortable job that he's good at, that people like him at, and he's entering into this unknown. I remember asking my wife, saying, what's he doing? Right. And everybody has an opinion about everybody's lives. And what I learned there was, like, I don't know the whole story, and none of us ever know the whole story about somebody.
Well, but here's what I'd say, Brent. I think every action was legitimate. Everyone. And it grieves me because there are some changes that had been made to it that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was never afforded that opportunity.
Right.
But I look back and, I think your point of looking back is really important, because when I talk about listening to your life, we need to learn how this is such a bad phrase, but
there we go.
But we need to autopsy the major decisions of our lives.
I think that's a good phrase. I like it.
So and dissect and talk about it. A few things I would tell you. Number one, I was not fully aware of why I was thinking the way that I was. Some, the diagnosis of being neurodivergent and those kind of things has helped give language to some of the things that maybe I was taking things more personally than I should have taken them, but I didn't have the language for it. But all I know is I was so profoundly hurt that I couldn't imagine being in the room anymore. I didn't run it by friends the way that I should have. Allison and I were on the same page. And I'll tell you, I look back on it and go, it felt right in the moment. I don't know long term if it was or if it wasn't. My path worked out, and there's been some opportunity that, there were opportunities that came to me that who knows would they come to me had I been in that role or not. As a person of faith, this is a place where my faith does sustain me, because I go that It's not that I serve a God who goes, I want bad things to happen to you. I serve a God who says, I meet you in the bad things, and we can steward these things together.
That's why theology is important.
It is, but it's one of those things of, you and I heard too many Christians who, they try to baptize everything as if it's so Pollyanna, and it's not. It's
right. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, and it's like it sucks.
Yeah,
and we're navigating that now. It's like a matter of, did my wife want to be in marketing for her entire life? Probably not. And regardless of how she feels about things or whatever, the decision was made to let her go, and she didn't have a choice in that. And so there's just a sense of, okay, I describe it as you're walking in a fog. And so the fog is a good image, and I think even better is, when pilots are being trained, they need to learn how to fly just by their instruments when, if you're in a cloud. And I think the instruments, the compass, if you will, becomes, what are those values that my life has been telling me? As long as I chart my course by those values, then I may not end up where I thought I was going to end up, but I'll be where I should be. It's hard to have those conversations when you're in the cloud.
Yeah.
The pilot shouldn't get into the cloud and go, gosh, I've never even looked at the instruments before. So
that's a bad way to fly a plane. I don't want to be on that plane with that guy or girl, right, or lady. Yeah. You ever have imposter syndrome? Does that ever happen?
All the time.
How do you
all the time?
How do you push that away?
Oh my goodness.
Because I think we all do, right? Like we all have imposter syndrome at some time or another.
Well, to the listeners, I mean, I serve at the institution where I graduated as a student. And so I came onto the faculty, and now I have colleagues who are my professors who, we're on a first name basis and trying to go, okay, your name is Dan, not Dr. Hawk. But that's a case in point there of such a generous colleague. And Dan, this Dr. Hawk easily became Dan to me. He's one of my closest friends. Here's something, it sounds so simple, Brandon, but I'm learning this more and more. Enneagram language, I'm an Enneagram 3, so I'm an achiever. I like to present an image. I don't want you to really see behind it. And so there is a sense in which I don't like to, I fail all the time. I just don't want you to know it. So, and this is where friendship comes in again, is the power of having people that you can go, I feel like an imposter. And you say it out loud. And I think so much of the struggle is we all have that internal critic in our heads, which is an amalgam of our own voices from our past, whatever. And when you speak it out loud and a friend hears it, oftentimes it's the friend who goes, I'm taking that. That's a lie. I don't do a good job with that. I just push things down. Ian Morgan Crone, who's written extensively on Enneagram language, he talks about threes. He says, threes have an emotional experience, but what they do is they file it away into the file folder and and eventually says that folder gets so large that it just pops and the papers go all across. And so you're spent scrambling trying to get these papers back in the folder again, instead of just going, no, this is what I'm feeling right now. Because we're talking a lot about, how I or how you, but we have friends who come to us who are going to share these things.
Yeah. And
here's what I found is really bad. And I feel this a lot with my male friends. And this is the problem. I think this is why males have, I've written on male friendship because it's just been a fascinating thing for me is without, I'm not a gender essentialist that says that every man has to be, a wrestler and every woman has to be a housewife. Okay. I'm not saying that language at all. Okay.
Right.
I'm saying from my own experience, what I've found is when Brandon comes to me and shares something deep, Jason feels the impulse to fix it. Instead of just going, no, when somebody has shared something deeply with you, you receive it as a gift and you steward it as such. And some of that is learning to listen well, being very gracious and sensitive with questions, because, Brandon, you and I have many shared friendships. And so let's go around that Enneagram thing again and go, we have a lot of friends who are Enneagram 5s who are investigators. who all of a sudden just start asking you 55 gazillion questions.
There's one in particular that comes to mind. I won't say his name, but yes.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Same one here. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh. And by the way, heart of gold. Really wants to be helpful.
Absolutely. You know? Yeah.
But there's a sense of like, oh my goodness gracious. I don't want a lot of questions. What you're trying to do is trying to create a space where a person, this is what hospitality really is. Hospitality is the cultivation of space between two souls to mingle, to kind of come together, which is freaky language for, men to hear a lot of times. Okay. But I think our inability to have that language is why, we just have so many identity issues in our country. For me to share vulnerably means that I am entrusting you with the reality that I don't have my life together, which is difficult to be able to share. But then what can happen in those moments, back to this conversation of listening to your life, is your friends know you well. So for example, my case in point of how I teach here at the seminary, to be able to go, and this is a real conversation with them right now of, Jason, do you want to be world renowned? Or do you want to be a legacy professor?
This is the end of part 1 of a 2-part episode with Dr. Jason Barnhart. Next week, we'll have episode 2.
Thanks for listening to the Caller ID podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe with all of your friends on all of your social media platforms. Thanks again. Signing off, Brandon Davis Wells.